The dust never settled in Cedar Ridge. It hung in the air like a bad memory, coating everything in the small frontier town with a layer of grit that matched the harsh reality of life in 1882 Arizona territory. Behind the counter of McKinnon's general store, 24-year-old Rose wiped down the same glass jar for the third time that morning, her mind wandering as it often did these days. Her father coughed again from his chair by the window, the sound wet and rattling. The consumption was getting worse, and they both knew it. Dr. Henderson had been honest about the prognosis. Maybe 6 months, maybe less. The thought made Rose's chest tight, but she pushed it away like she pushed away most uncomfortable feelings. "Rose, honey," her father called weakly. "Mr. Patterson's coming up the walk." She looked up to see the barrel-chested shopkeeper from across the street approaching their door, his expression serious. Thomas Patterson owned the largest mercantile in town and had been her father's friend for nearly 15 years. But Rose knew this wasn't a social call. The bell above the door chimed as Patterson entered, removing his hat and nodding respectfully. "Morning, Rose. James?" He cleared his throat. "James, I hate to bother you when you're not feeling well, but I need to speak plainly." Rose's father struggled to sit up straighter. "What's on your mind, Tom?" "It's about Rose." Patterson glanced at her apologetically. "The whole town's talking. James, she's 24 now, and well..." He trailed off, clearly uncomfortable. "And what?" Rose demanded, setting down the jar with more force than necessary. Patterson shifted his weight. "Young Walsh was asking about you again. His pa's got that big spread south of town, and the boy's looking to settle down. But after what happened at the church social last month..." Rose felt her face burn with embarrassment. Jeremy Walsh had approached her at the social, all confidence and swagger. When she'd politely declined his invitation to walk outside, he'd laughed loudly enough for half the town to hear. "That girl's too smart for her own good," he'd announced. "Thinks she knows more than any man. No wonder she's still on the shelf." The memory still stung. Rose had run home that night humiliated and angry in equal measure. "Jeremy Walsh can take his opinions and..." Rose began hotly. "Rose." Her father interrupted gently. "Tom's trying to help." Patterson nodded gratefully. "The thing is, Jeremy's not the only one who feels that way. You're educated, Rose. You can read and write better than most men in town. You run this store like it's nothing. But that makes the young men uncomfortable. So I should pretend to be stupid?" Rose's voice rose. "I should bat my eyelashes and act helpless so some man will take pity on me?" "That's not what I'm saying," Patterson replied carefully. "But you have to understand how things are. Men want to feel needed. They want to feel like they're the strong ones, the smart ones. When a woman shows she can handle everything herself, then maybe those men aren't worth having," Rose shot back. Her father coughed again, this time more violently. When he finally caught his breath, his face was pale. "Rose, come here, sweetheart." She moved to his side, kneeling beside his chair. His hand, once strong from years of ranch work, felt fragile in hers. "I won't be here much longer," he said quietly. "And that scares me, not for myself but for you. This isn't Boston or San Francisco. This is the frontier. A woman alone out here." He shook his head. "I need to know you'll be taken care of." Rose felt tears prick her eyes. "Papa, I can take care of myself. I've been running this store for 2 years now. I know the books, I know the suppliers, I know you do, honey, that's not the point." He squeezed her hand weakly. "The point is, this town won't let you. Once I'm gone, they'll find ways to push you out. They'll say it's not proper for an unmarried woman to run a business. They'll make things difficult until you have no choice but to sell and move on." Patterson nodded grimly. "He's right, Rose. I wish it weren't so, but it is." Rose stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, the town went about its daily business. Women in long dresses hurried between shops with their children in tow. Men conducted business with firm handshakes and serious expressions. Everything had its place, its proper order. Everything except her. "There's going to be another dance next Saturday," Patterson said carefully, "at the church hall. Maybe if you softened your approach a bit, wore something pretty, smiled more, let the men do the talking, Let them think I'm empty-headed, you mean? Let them think you need them, Patterson corrected. It's not about being smart or stupid, Rose. It's about making them feel important. After Patterson left, Rose and her father sat in silence for a long time. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, highlighting the dust motes that danced in the air like tiny spirits. I don't know how to be someone I'm not, Papa, Rose finally said. I know, honey. That's what makes this so hard. He was quiet for a moment. Your mother was like you, you know. Strong-willed, intelligent. But she knew when to bend, when to let me think I was in charge even when she was really running things. Rose had heard stories about her mother who had died when Rose was only 5. Sometimes she wondered if her life would have been different if her mother had lived to teach her the subtle art of managing men's egos. Maybe I should just leave, Rose said suddenly. Go east, to one of the big cities. There might be opportunities there for a woman with business skills. Her father's face crumpled. With what money? And to do what? Rose, be realistic. Even in the big cities, the world belongs to men. At least here, you'd have a husband to protect you. The week passed slowly. Rose threw herself into the store's business, taking inventory, updating the books, writing letters to suppliers. But she couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out, not just for her father, but for her entire future. Saturday evening arrived with a brilliant sunset that painted the desert sky in shades of orange and pink. Rose stood before her small mirror, trying to decide what to wear to the dance. Her choices were limited. A brown woolen dress that was practical but plain, a blue cotton dress that was slightly prettier but showed its age, and a green silk dress her father had bought her 2 years ago for her birthday. She chose the green one, even though it felt like a costume. She pinned her dark hair up carefully and even dabbed a bit of her mother's old perfume on her wrists. Looking at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. The church hall was already crowded when she arrived with her father. The local women had outdone themselves with decorations, wildflowers in mason jars, colorful, ribbons strung from the rafters and tables laden with food. A small group of musicians tuned their instruments in one corner. Rose tried to follow Patterson's advice. When Mrs. Henderson complimented her dress, she thanked her graciously instead of pointing out that she'd altered it herself. When young Billy Morrison asked about the store's new shipment of fabric, she smiled sweetly and suggested he ask his mother to stop by during the week. For a while, it seemed to be working. Several young men approached her throughout the evening, making polite conversation. She bit her tongue when one of them incorrectly explained how the railroad system worked. She nodded and smiled when another pontificated about business matters she understood better than he did. But then Jeremy Walsh arrived. He swaggered into the hall like he owned it, his expensive clothes and confident manner immediately drawing attention. His father owned the largest ranch in the county, and everyone knew Jeremy was his only heir. In a place like Cedar Ridge, that made him quite the catch. Rose tried to avoid him, but the hall wasn't that large. Eventually, he cornered her near the refreshment table. Well, he drawled, looking her up and down appreciatively. Look who decided to dress like a lady tonight. Rose forced a smile. Good evening, Jeremy. That's more like it. See? You can be pleasant when you try. He moved closer and she could smell whiskey on his breath. Dance with me. It wasn't really a request. Rose glanced around the room and realized that everyone was watching. Her father sat in a chair nearby, his face hopeful but concerned. This was her chance, maybe her last chance, to secure a future in Cedar Ridge. I'd be honored, she said quietly. Jeremy led her onto the dance floor with a triumphant smile. The music started and they began to move together. He was a good dancer, she had to admit, confident and smooth. As they swayed to the music, he leaned close to her ear. See how nice this is when you're not trying to prove you're smarter than everyone else? He murmured. Rose bit her lip and said nothing. My father's been talking to yours, Jeremy continued. About the future, about what happens to you when the old man kicks off. Rose stiffened. Jeremy, shh, let me finish. His grip on her waist tightened slightly. Pa thinks it would be a good arrangement. You'd have security, a home, a position in society, and I'd get a wife who can read and write, help with the ranch books. Rose looked up at him, studying his face. And what do you get out of it? Jeremy's smile turned cold. A woman who knows her place. Someone I can shape into a proper wife. Someone grateful enough for the rescue that she won't cause trouble. The music swirled around them, but Rose felt like she was drowning. This was it. Her chance for the security her father wanted for her. Jeremy Walsh was rich, young, and willing to marry her despite what everyone saw as her flaws. Think about it, Jeremy said as the song ended. B. Rose stood frozen in the moonlight, her heart hammering against her ribs. The Apache warrior before her made no threatening moves, but his presence was so commanding that she felt small and fragile in comparison. He was perhaps 30 years old, with weathered skin that spoke of countless days under the desert sun, and intelligent eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I am called Running Wolf by your people," he replied, his English so fluent it surprised her. "Among my own, I have other names." Rose glanced nervously toward town, but Cedar Ridge seemed impossibly far away now, its flickering lights like distant stars. "You shouldn't be here. The cavalry patrols are drunk in the saloon," Running Wolf finished calmly. "I have been watching your town for many nights, learning its rhythms, its weaknesses." The implied threat should have terrified her, but somehow, it didn't. There was no menace in his tone, only stated fact. "Why?" she asked. Running Wolf moved closer, and Rose caught the scent of sage and leather. "Because my world is ending," he said simply, "and I am trying to decide if yours is worth preserving." He gestured toward Cedar Ridge with what might have been contempt. "I have watched your people for weeks now, the men who puff themselves up like prairie chickens, fighting over scraps of power, the women who make themselves small and quiet to avoid their anger." Rose felt heat rise in her cheeks. "You don't understand our ways." "Do I not?" Running Wolf's eyes held hers steadily. "I watched you tonight, Rose McKinnon. I saw you dim your light so that lesser men could feel brighter." The fact that he knew, her name sent a chill down her spine. "How long have you been watching?" "Long enough to know that you are drowning in a world that has no place for your spirit." He took another step closer, and Rose could see the intricate beadwork on his buckskin shirt. "Tell me, what did the young man with the expensive clothes offer you tonight?" Rose's mouth fell open. "You were at the dance?" "I was in the shadows outside. Sound carries on the night air." Running Wolf's expression darkened. "He spoke of you like a horse he was considering purchasing, something to break and train to his will." The accuracy of his observation stung because it was so true. Rose looked away, embarrassed by how clearly this stranger had seen through the evening's pretense. "It's not that simple," she said defensively. "He's offering security, a home, position in the community. And what does he require in return?" Rose was quiet for a long moment. "That I become someone else," she finally admitted. Running Wolf nodded as if this confirmed something he already knew. "Among my people, such a thing would be seen as madness. To take a strong woman and try to make her weak, to silence a wise voice, it would be like breaking the wings of an eagle and expecting it to soar." Despite her fear, Rose found herself curious. "Your people don't control their women?" Something that might have been amusement flickered in Running Wolf's eyes. "Control the wind, control the river, control the mountain?" He shook his head. "Apache women choose their own paths. They speak in council. They own their own horses, their own lodges. A wise man listens to his wife's counsel, for she often sees what he cannot." The idea seemed impossible to Rose, like something from a fairy tale. "But surely the men make the important decisions. What decisions are more important than who lives and who dies? Apache women have the right to spare captives or condemn them. They choose when to move camp, when to make peace, when to prepare for war." Running Wolf studied her face in the moonlight. You find this hard to believe. It's just so different from everything I've known. Yes. Your world teaches women to be grateful for chains, so long as they are pretty chains. Running Wolf's voice held sadness now. But you were not made for chains, Rose McKinnon. I can see it in the way you move, the way you speak. You are like a wild horse trying to live in a stable. Rose wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm night. What choice do I have? This is the world I was born into. There are always choices. But first, let me tell you why I spoke the words I did. Running Wolf moved to a nearby rock and sat down, gesturing for her to do the same. After a moment's hesitation, Rose settled onto a smaller boulder a few feet away. I had 3 sons. Running Wolf began, his voice taking on the cadence of a storyteller. Each one different, each one precious beyond words. The eldest was called Soaring Eagle. He was a warrior, brave and fierce, with a heart as large as the sky. He could ride any horse, track any prey, and his war cry could freeze the blood of his enemies. Rose found herself leaning forward, caught up in his words despite herself. My second son was Silent Hunter. Where Soaring Eagle was thunder, Silent Hunter was the whisper of wind through grass. He could move through the desert like a ghost, could read signs that others missed completely. He understood the language of animals and could predict weather days in advance. And the third? Rose asked softly. Running Wolf's expression grew tender. Laughing Crow, the youngest, barely 16 when... He paused, collecting himself. Laughing Crow was the keeper of stories, the one who remembered the old ways and could make anyone laugh even in the darkest times. He had his mother's gift for healing and his grandfather's wisdom. What happened to them? What always happens when 2 worlds collide, Running Wolf said bitterly. The cavalry came to our camp 3 years ago, claiming we had stolen cattle. We had not, but it did not matter. In the fighting that followed, Soaring Eagle died defending the women and children. Silent Hunter was shot down trying to lead them to safety. And Laughing Crow... His voice broke slightly. Laughing Crow died of the white man's spotted sickness the following winter. Rose felt tears spring to her eyes. I'm so sorry. My wife died with him. She could not bear to lose all her children and simply faded away. Running Wolf stared out at the desert for a long moment. In our tradition, a man's spirit lives on through his children. Without sons to carry forward my name, my stories, my knowledge of the old ways, I am already dead. I am simply waiting for my body to understand this. The profound sadness in his voice made Rose's chest ache. But you said about claiming me for all your sons. What did you mean? Running Wolf turned back to her, and she saw a fierce determination in his eyes. Among my people, when a great warrior dies without heirs, sometimes another can stand in his place. A woman strong enough, wise enough, brave enough to carry the spirits of the lost ones forward. I don't understand. If you were to become my wife, to bear children who would carry the names and stories of Soaring Eagle, Silent Hunter, and Laughing Crow, then their spirits would live again. You would not just be their stepmother. You would be their spiritual mother, the one who brings them back to life. Rose stared at him, her mind reeling. You're asking me to marry you? But we just met. You don't even know me. I have been watching you for weeks, Running Wolf reminded her. I have seen your strength when you think no one is looking. I have watched you care for your sick father with a tenderness that honors you. I have seen you run that store with more skill than most men could manage. And tonight, I saw you endure humiliation with dignity, even as your spirit cried out for freedom. He stood and moved closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. You think no man has ever truly seen you, Rose McKinnon, but I see you. I see the warrior's heart beating in your chest. I see the wisdom in your eyes. I see the wild spirit that your people try to tame. Rose's breath came in short gasps. This is madness. I'm not Apache. I don't know your ways, your language, your customs. These things can be learned. What cannot be learned is courage, intelligence, compassion. These you already possess in abundance. But I'm white. Your people would never accept me. Running Wolf smiled slightly. My people judge by character, not color. We have had white captives who became beloved members of our bands. We have had Mexican wives who were honored as great leaders. What matters is the strength of your spirit, not the shade of your skin. Rose stood abruptly and began pacing, her mind spinning with the impossibility of what he was suggesting. Even if I wanted to, which I'm not saying I do, I couldn't just disappear. My father needs me. The store. Your father is dying. Running Wolf said gently but firmly. You know this. And when he dies, what then? You will marry the man with expensive clothes who sees you as something to be broken, or perhaps another like him. Rose stopped pacing and turned to face him. So I should run away with a complete stranger instead? Live in the wilderness with people who might kill me on sight? Yes, Running Wolf said simply, if you are brave, enough to choose life over slow death. The silence stretched between them, filled with the sound of night insects and the distant call of a coyote. Rose felt as though she stood at the edge of a cliff, with the known world behind her and an unimaginable drop ahead. I need time to think, she said finally. Running Wolf nodded. Time is something we may not have much of. The Bluecoats are planning another sweep through our territory. My scouts bring word that they will move within the next moon. How do you know? The same way I know that your father grows weaker each day, that the man with expensive clothes speaks of owning you like property, that your heart breaks a little more each time you pretend to be less than you are. Running Wolf's eyes held hers steadily. I make it my business to know things that matter. He began to move away. Melting back, Rose barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Running Wolf's face in the moonlight and heard his impossible offer echoing in her mind. When dawn finally broke over the desert, she felt like a different person from the woman who had attended the dance. Just hours before, her father was worse in the morning. The coughing fits lasted longer, and she could see the pain he tried to hide behind his gentle smiles. Dr. Henderson stopped by around noon, his expression growing more grave after examining the sick man. How long? Rose asked quietly when they stepped outside. Days, maybe a week or two at most. The doctor replied sadly. I'm sorry, Rose. I wish there was more I could do. After he left, Rose sat with her father, reading to him from his favorite book of poetry. But her mind kept wandering to the desert, to the man who had offered her a life she couldn't even imagine. Papa, she said during a quiet moment, tell me about Mama again. About how you met her. Her father's eyes brightened slightly. Your mother was the most remarkable woman I ever knew. Smart as a whip, brave as any man, and beautiful inside and out. You've said that before. But what I mean is, how did you know she was the right choice? How did you know to take a chance on love? Her father studied her face carefully. This is about young Walsh, isn't it? Rose hesitated. In a way. Rose, honey, I've seen the way you look when his name comes up. You're not happy about the prospect, are you? She shook her head, tears threatening. Papa, what if there was someone else, someone completely unexpected, someone who saw me differently than anyone in town ever has? Then I'd say, follow your heart, he said without hesitation. Life is too short to spend it pretending to be someone you're not, even if it meant leaving everything behind, even if it meant taking a risk that might not work out. Her father was quiet for a long moment, studying her face with the intuition of a man who had known her all her life. Rose, what aren't you telling me? Before she could answer, Jeremy Walsh appeared at their door, dressed in his finest clothes and carrying a bouquet of wildflowers. Rose's heart sank as she let him in. Good afternoon, Mr. McKinnon, Rose, Jeremy said with the confidence of a man who believed he was doing them a great favor. I hope you're feeling better today, sir. As well as can be expected, Rose's father replied carefully. Jeremy turned to Rose with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I trust you've had time to consider our conversation last night. Rose felt trapped. Her father was watching hopefully. Jeremy was standing there expecting an answer, and her mind was full of a desert warrior who had offered her the impossible. Jeremy, Before you answer, Jeremy interrupted, let me sweeten the offer. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small velvet box. This was my grandmother's ring. Pa thought you might like to see it. The ring was beautiful, a delicate, gold band set with a modest but genuine diamond. It represented security, respectability, everything her father wanted for her. It also felt like a shackle. It's lovely, Rose managed. I spoke with Reverend Matthews this morning. Jeremy continued, his confidence growing. He could perform the ceremony next Sunday. Nothing fancy, of course, given your father's condition, but something proper. Rose's father began coughing again, the sound harsh and wet. When he finally caught his breath, his face was pale with exhaustion. Papa, you should rest, Rose said quickly. No, I want to hear this, he insisted, though his voice was weak. Jeremy, what are your intentions toward my daughter? Jeremy straightened proudly. Sir, I intend to make Rose my wife. She'll have a good home, want for nothing, and I'll see that she's properly guided in her duties as a married woman. The word guided made Rose's skin crawl, but she forced herself to remain silent. And what would those duties include? Her father asked quietly. The usual things, of course. Managing the household, raising children, supporting me in social and business matters. Rose is an intelligent woman, perhaps too intelligent for her own good. But I believe I can help her channel that intelligence in more appropriate directions. Rose felt something snap inside her chest. More appropriate directions? Jeremy's smile became patronizing. Well, of course, dear. A woman's mind isn't designed for the complexities of business and politics, but you'll make an excellent hostess, and your education will be useful in teaching our children. I see. Rose's voice was dangerously calm. And what if I have opinions about business matters? What if I want to be involved in decisions that affect our family? Jeremy laughed condescendingly. Rose, that's exactly the kind of thinking that's kept you unmarried this long. A wise wife trusts her husband's judgment and doesn't trouble herself with matters beyond her understanding. Rose looked at her father, hoping to see some sign that he recognized the insult in Jeremy's words. Instead, she saw relief and gratitude on his tired face. Thank you, Jeremy, her father said weakly. You're offering Rose a good life. I'm grateful that you're willing to overlook her. Strong will. Something died in Rose's heart at those words. Even her beloved father saw her spirit as something to be overlooked rather than celebrated. I need some time to think, Rose said quietly. Jeremy's confidence faltered slightly. What's to think about? I'm offering you everything a woman could want. Everything a woman should want, Rose corrected. That's different. That night, Rose waited until her father was asleep before slipping out into the desert. She didn't have to wait long before Running Wolf emerged from the shadows, as if he had been expecting her. You came back, she said. As did you. He studied, her face in the moonlight. The young man with expensive clothes visited today. It wasn't a question. Rose wondered if he had been watching again, or if her expression simply told the story. He proposed, she said simply. And what was your answer? I told him I needed time to think. Rose wrapped her arms around herself. My father was so grateful. He sees Jeremy as my salvation. Running Wolf was quiet for a moment. And what do you see? A cage with golden bars. The words came out more bitter than she intended. Jeremy actually said that my mind isn't designed for complex thinking. He wants to guide me toward more appropriate feminine pursuits. And yet you are still here, still considering his offer. Rose turned to face him fully. Because I'm scared. What you're offering, it's like asking me to jump off a cliff and hope I can fly. At least with Jeremy, I know what I'm getting. Do you? Running Wolf moved closer. Do you truly know what your life would be like? Bound to a man who sees your greatest strengths as flaws to be corrected? Before Rose could answer, the sound of horses approaching made them both freeze. Running Wolf melted back into the shadows so quickly that Rose almost wondered if she had imagined him. A moment later, 3 cavalry soldiers rode into view, their uniforms dark against the moonlight. "Evening, miss," the sergeant called out. "You shouldn't be out here alone. There have been Apache sightings in the area." Rose's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. "I was just getting some air. I couldn't sleep." "Best get inside then. These Apaches are tricky. They can be right next to you and you'd never know it." The sergeant touched his hat. "Good night, miss." After they rode away, Rose waited several minutes before whispering into the darkness, "Running Wolf?" He didn't reappear, and she realized he was gone. The encounter with the patrol had reminded them both how dangerous these meetings were. The next 2 days passed in a blur. Her father grew weaker, spending most of his time sleeping. Jeremy visited again, pressing for an answer. The whole town seemed to be watching, waiting to see if the unmarriageable Rose McKinnon would finally accept the proposal that had been such a generous offer. On the 3rd night, her father woke her from a light sleep. "Rose," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Come here, honey." She knelt beside his bed, taking his cold hand in hers. His breathing was labored, and she knew with terrible certainty that time was running out. "Papa, I need to tell you something," he said with great effort. "About your mother." Rose leaned closer, straining to hear his weak voice. She wasn't always the perfect lady everyone remembers. When I met her, she was different, wild, like you. People said she was unsuitable, too independent, too strong-willed. Rose's breath caught. "Papa, I married her anyway because I loved who she really was, and she made me promise, if anything happened to her, to let you be yourself, not to try to tame you like a wild horse." His grip on her hand tightened with surprising strength. "I failed her. I failed you. I was so scared for your future that I forgot what made you special." Tears streamed down Rose's face. "Papa, you didn't fail anyone. That young man, Jeremy, he'll break your spirit, Rose, just like people wanted to break your mother's." Her father's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Don't let him. Don't let anyone make you smaller than you are." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying, follow your heart, wherever it leads, even if it means leaving everything behind, even if it means taking risks that terrify both of us." He squeezed her hand weakly. "Promise me, Rose. Promise you won't settle for less than someone who loves all of you, not just the parts that are convenient." "I promise, Papa." Her father smiled peacefully. Dawn came too soon, and with it the urgent business of breaking camp. Rose had watched this process several times before, but now she understood the deadly seriousness behind the practiced efficiency. Every minute could mean the difference between freedom and capture, or death. The Apache could pack their entire lives into bundles that could be carried on horseback within an hour. Rose marveled at how quickly the bustling camp transformed into an empty clearing, leaving almost no trace that 30 people had lived there. She worked alongside the women, her hands now skilled enough to be helpful rather than merely willing. Bright Moon had taught her to pack the essential herbs and medicines, to secure the food supply so nothing would spoil during hard travel, to fold the precious hides and blankets so they took up minimal space. "You learn fast, white girl," Bright Moon said approvingly as Rose efficiently wrapped a collection of sacred items in soft deerskin. "Maybe you lived through this after all." Despite the grim circumstances, Rose found herself smiling. Among the Apache, survival was never guaranteed, but it was never taken for granted either. Every day was earned through skill, courage, and the support of the community. Running Wolf appeared at her side as they prepared to mount their horses. "Stay close to me today," he said quietly. "The country we're heading into is rough, and if we encounter the cavalry, things will happen very fast." Rose nodded, her stomach tight with nervousness. She had become a decent rider during her weeks with the band, but she was still nowhere near the level of Apache horsemanship that made the others seem like centaurs. They rode hard throughout the day, following trails that seemed invisible to Rose but were clear as roads to the Apache guides. The landscape grew more rugged as they climbed higher into the mountains, with narrow passes and steep drops that made her grateful for her horses' sure footing. By evening, they had reached a hidden canyon deep in the heart of Apache territory. High walls of red rock surrounded a small valley with a spring and enough grass for the horses. It was beautiful, but also felt like a trap. There was only one way in or out. "Why here?" Rose asked Running Wolf as they made camp. "Sacred place," he replied simply. "If we must make our stand, it should be where our ancestors can watch over us. And if we are to speak marriage words, they should witness them." As night fell, the canyon filled with an otherworldly beauty. The rock walls glowed deep red in the firelight, and the spring created a soft murmuring that seemed to carry ancient voices. Rose felt the power of the place settling into her bones. Bright Moon approached as Rose was tending to her horse. "Tonight," the old woman said, "you become one of us in truth. Are you ready?" "I don't know what that means," Rose admitted. "In my world, weddings are simple ceremonies in churches. This feels like something much deeper." "It is." Bright Moon's weathered face was serious. "Tonight you don't just marry Running Wolf. You marry his past, his spirits, his duty to the ancestors. You become mother to sons who died before you ever existed." Rose felt a shiver run down her spine. "How is that possible?" "Apache way is not white way," Bright Moon reminded her. "Your people think death is ending. Apache know death is just crossing to other side. Spirit never dies, only changes form." She led Rose to a secluded part of the canyon where several women had prepared a small shelter. "First, you must be cleansed of old life, old thoughts, old fears. Then you can receive new spirits." What followed was unlike anything Rose had ever experienced. The women helped her bathe in the sacred spring, washing away not just the dust of travel, but symbolically removing her past. They dressed her in a beautiful white buckskin dress decorated with intricate beadwork and painted symbols she was only beginning to understand. Bright Moon painted designs on Rose's face and hands with clay mixed with sacred herbs. "These marks tell story," she explained. "They say you are a woman who crossed between worlds, woman brave enough to claim spirits of the dead, woman who will carry forward the line of great warriors." As the ceremony began, Rose realized that every member of the band was present, forming a circle around the central fire. Even the children sat quietly, understanding the solemnity of the moment. Running Wolf stood across from her wearing full ceremonial dress, a magnificent shirt decorated with eagle feathers and beadwork that told the story of his family line. His long hair was braided with ornaments that caught the firelight, and his face was painted with symbols Rose recognized as representing his warrior status and spiritual power. Bright Moon began to speak in Apache, her voice carrying clearly across the canyon. Rose couldn't understand all the words, but she caught familiar names: Soaring Eagle, Silent Hunter, Laughing Crow. The old woman was calling to the spirits of the dead, asking them to witness what was about to happen. An elderly man Rose had never seen before stepped forward. He was introduced as Wise Bear, a medicine man who had come from another band specifically for the ceremony. His presence added weight to the proceedings that made Rose's hands tremble. "Woman who crosses between," Wise Bear said in English. "Do you understand what you're being asked to do?" Rose found her voice somehow. "I'm being asked to become the spiritual mother of 3 sons who died before I met their father. More than that, you are being asked to carry their memories, their teachings, their very souls forward into new life. Any children you bear will not just be your children and Running Wolf's children. They will be the reincarnated spirits of Soaring Eagle, Silent Hunter, and Laughing Crow." The magnitude of that responsibility made Rose's knees weak. She was being asked not just to honor the memory of Running Wolf's sons, but to literally bring them back to life through any children she might have. "I understand," she whispered. "And do you accept this sacred duty?" Rose looked around the circle of faces watching her. These people had accepted her, taught her, protected her. They had given her a home when her own world had rejected her. Now, they were asking her to become the vessel through which their friend's greatest treasure, his lost sons, could live again. I accept, she said clearly. What happened next was both beautiful and mystical. Wise Bear began a chant that seemed to call up the very spirits of the canyon. The other Apache joined their voices to his, creating a sound that seemed to make the rock walls themselves vibrate. Running Wolf stepped forward and began to speak, first in Apache and then in English so Rose could understand. Spirits of my sons, hear me. This woman has crossed the great distance between worlds to stand with us. She has proven her courage, her wisdom, her strength. I offer her to you as the one who will carry you back to the world of the living. He took Rose's hands, and she felt warmth flow between them that seemed to come from somewhere beyond the physical. Soaring eagle, my brave firstborn, look upon this woman. See how she left everything she knew to follow her heart into danger. She has your courage. Will you accept her as the one who can give you new life? Rose felt something shift in the air, around them, as if an invisible presence had moved closer. The feeling was so strong she almost looked over her shoulder. Silent Hunter, my wise second son, see how this woman learned our ways, how she watches and listens and understands what others miss. She has your gift of seeing truly. Will you accept her as the one who can bring you back? Again, that sense of presence, stronger now. Rose's skin prickled with the feeling of being watched by eyes she couldn't see. Laughing Crow, my joy bringer, my storyteller, see how this woman brings light wherever she goes, how she finds beauty even in hardship. She has your gift for seeing the wonder in life. Will you accept her as the vessel of your return? This time Rose was sure she felt something. A warmth, a lightness, almost like gentle laughter carried on the night breeze. Tears began to stream down her face as she realized what was happening. She was somehow, impossibly, being accepted by spirits she could not see but could unmistakably feel. Running Wolf turned to address the gathered band. My people, witness what happens here. This woman becomes more than wife to me. She becomes the bridge between the world of the living and the world of the spirits. Through her, my sons will return. Wise Bear stepped forward with a bowl of water from the sacred spring. Drink, he commanded Rose, as this water becomes part of your body, so the spirits of the three sons become part of your soul. Rose drank deeply, the water tasting of minerals and earth and something indefinable that seemed to carry the essence of the mountains themselves. Then Running Wolf drank from the same bowl, and Wise Bear took both their hands and placed them on his heart. By the power of the ancestors, by the blessing of the spirits, by the witness of the people, you are now one flesh, one spirit, one purpose. What the Great Spirit has joined, let no earthly power separate. The band erupted in celebration then, with whoops and songs and the sound of drums that seemed to make the canyon walls sing. Rose felt herself swept into a joyous chaos of congratulations and blessings. But even in the midst of the celebration, she remained aware of that sense of presence around her. It was as if three invisible companions had joined her, waiting patiently for their chance to live again. The celebration continued long into the night, with storytelling and singing and dancing around the central fire. Rose learned that Apache weddings were not just ceremonies but festivals that honored the joining of two spirits and the continuation of family lines. As the night wore on, however, the mood gray, the battle for the sacred canyon began just before dawn. When the first light was painting the red walls with gold, Rose crouched behind a boulder, her rifle ready, watching as cavalry soldiers poured into the narrow entrance like a blue and brass river of death. She had never been in combat before, but weeks of living with the Apache had taught her to move quietly, to think quickly, and to shoot straight. More importantly, she had learned to see the world through Apache eyes, and that meant understanding terrain, patience, and the art of making every shot count. There, Running Wolf pointed to a cluster of soldiers trying to establish position near the spring. If they control the water, they control everything. Rose nodded and sighted down her rifle. Her first shot took down a sergeant who was shouting orders, and she felt a grim satisfaction as the soldiers scattered in confusion. This was her home now, her family under attack. Fear had transformed into fierce protective instinct. The battle raged for hours. The Apache had the advantage of position and knowledge of the canyon, but the cavalry had superior numbers and weapons. Rose found herself moving from position to position, sometimes fighting alongside the warriors, sometimes helping the women evacuate the wounded. It was during one of these movements that she saw Jeremy Walsh. He wore the uniform of a cavalry scout, and his expensive clothes had been replaced by practical leather and wool. But there was no mistaking that arrogant face, now twisted with rage and determination. He was shouting orders to a group of soldiers, pointing toward the hidden shelter where several Apache children were being protected. "The woman!" she heard him yell. "Find the white woman. She's the key to breaking their spirit." Rose realized with cold clarity that Jeremy had somehow convinced the cavalry that capturing her would demoralize the Apache. He was using his desire for revenge to put innocent children in danger. She made a decision that would have terrified the old Rose, but felt perfectly natural to a woman who holds the spirits of 3 sons. Moving like silent hunter, she worked her way around the canyon wall until she was behind Jeremy's position. When she stood up with her rifle trained on him, several soldiers spun around in alarm. "Jeremy Walsh," she called out clearly, her voice echoing off the canyon walls. He turned, and his face went through a series of expressions: surprise, relief, rage, and finally a cold satisfaction. "Rose McKinnon," he said, spreading his arms wide. "Come to your senses at last, ready to come home where you belong? My name is Woman Who Holds the Spirits of 3 Sons," Rose replied calmly, "and I am home." Jeremy's face darkened. "You've been brainwashed by these savages. But don't worry. We'll cure you of that nonsense soon enough. The only nonsense is thinking you can own another person's spirit," Rose said. She could feel the presence of Soaring Eagle giving her courage, Silent Hunter giving her patience, Laughing Crow giving her the ability to see the absurdity in Jeremy's posturing. "You were meant to be my wife," Jeremy snarled. "I offered you everything." "You offered me a cage," Rose corrected. "These people offered me wings. The standoff might have continued, but the sound of Running Wolf's war cry echoing through the canyon changed everything." Rose saw Jeremy's eyes flick toward the sound, saw him gesture to his men, and realized he was planning to use her as a hostage to force Running Wolf into the open. Soaring Eagle's courage flowed through her as she made her choice. Instead of surrendering, she dove to one side and opened fire, scattering the soldiers and giving the Apache defenders crucial seconds to reposition. Jeremy's face went white with fury. "Kill them all!" he screamed. "Every last one!" But his words were lost in the chaos of renewed fighting. The battle had entered its final, most desperate phase. Rose found herself back to back with Running Wolf as cavalry soldiers surrounded their position. They fought with the coordination of people who shared one spirit, covering each other's movements, making every shot count. "My love," Running Wolf said during a brief lull, "if we don't survive this, we will." Rose interrupted fiercely. "The spirits didn't bring us together just to see us die on our wedding night." But even as she spoke, she could see that the situation was becoming hopeless. More soldiers kept pouring into the canyon, and the Apache were running low on ammunition. That's when Bright Moon appeared at Rose's shoulder, the old woman moving with surprising speed despite her age. "There is another way," she said urgently. "Old path, secret way out, but someone must stay behind to hold them off." Rose and Running Wolf exchanged a look of perfect understanding. "Take the others," Running Wolf said immediately. "I'll buy you time." "No." Rose's voice was absolute. "We go together or not at all." "Rose. Woman who holds the spirits of 3 sons," she corrected firmly. "And that woman doesn't abandon her family." Before Running Wolf could argue further, the sound of approaching reinforcements echoed from the canyon entrance. More cavalry, perhaps a full company, was riding to join the battle. But these new voices were shouting in alarm, not triumph. Rose heard the distinctive war cries of Apache warriors and realized that help had arrived. Running Wolf's face broke into a fierce grin. "My brother Stone Bear," he said. "I should have known he wouldn't let us fight alone." The tide of battle turned. Quickly after that, Caught between two Apache forces, the cavalry found themselves outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Many surrendered immediately, while others retreated toward the canyon entrance in confusion. Jeremy Walsh was among those trying to escape, but his path brought him directly past Rose's position. When he saw her, something snapped in his face. "If I can't have you, no one can," he snarled, raising his pistol. Time seemed to slow. Rose saw Jeremy's finger tighten on the trigger, saw Running Wolf start to move toward her but realized he was too far away to help. Then the shot rang out, but it wasn't Jeremy's gun that had fired. Bright Moon stood beside Rose, still holding the smoking pistol she had somehow drawn faster than anyone could follow. Jeremy Walsh lay motionless on the canyon floor, his expression of rage frozen forever. "Old woman may be slow to walk," Bright Moon said dryly, "but hands still quick enough when needed." The rest of the cavalry surrendered soon after, and by full daylight the canyon was quiet again except for the sound of water from the sacred spring and the soft voices of people tending to the wounded. Rose knelt beside Running Wolf, who had taken a bullet in the shoulder during the final fighting. It was painful but not life-threatening, and she worked to clean and bandage the wound while he watched her with eyes full of love and pride. "You fought like Soaring Eagle," he said softly. "With courage that knew no fear." "I moved like Silent Hunter," Rose replied, concentrating on her work. "Seeing everything, missing nothing. And you found joy even in battle, like Laughing Crow finding humor in the darkest moments." Rose looked up at him, understanding flooding through her. "They were with me, weren't they? During the fighting I could feel them. They will always be with you now," Running Wolf confirmed. "You are truly their spiritual mother." Over the following months, as Running Wolf healed and the band moved deeper into Mexico to escape further cavalry pursuit, Rose settled into her new life completely. She learned the healing arts from Bright Moon, mastered the Apache language, and became a respected voice in the council meetings that decided the band's future. But more than that, she felt the presence of the three spirits growing stronger within her. When she rode out with hunting parties, she seemed to possess Silent Hunter's ability to read the landscape. When she stood guard during dangerous times, Soaring Eagle's fearless courage flowed through her. When she told stories around the evening fires, Laughing Crow's gift for finding wonder and joy in simple things made everyone lean forward to listen. A year after the battle at the Sacred Canyon, Rose discovered she was pregnant. The entire band celebrated, understanding the spiritual significance of the moment. This child would be the first of the returning spirits, the beginning of Running Wolf's family line restored. When her son was born under a sky blazing with stars, there was no question what his name would be. He came into the world with a lusty cry that seemed to echo off the desert cliffs, announcing his presence with the fearlessness of a warrior. "Soaring Eagle," Running Wolf whispered as he held his son for the first time. "Welcome back, my boy." Rose felt tears of joy stream down her face as she watched her husband with their child. But more than that, she felt a sense of completion that went beyond the physical. One of the three spirits had found its way home. 2 years later, she gave birth to a second son, this one arriving so quietly that they barely realized labor had begun. Silent Hunter had returned as he had lived, without fanfare but with perfect timing. And 3 years after that, their third son was born on a day when the whole band was laughing and celebrating the successful hunt. Laughing Crow had come back, to a world full of the joy he had always loved. As Rose watched her 3 boys grow, she marveled at how perfectly they embodied the spirits they carried. Little Soaring Eagle was fearless and bold, always climbing the highest rocks and attempting the most daring feats. Silent Hunter was thoughtful and observant,